To really say stuff, but you know the message. Because life appears random. It feels like stuff just happens and it's purposeless. And it's really important to trust the meaning in everything, even if we can't see the deeper purpose. It happens. We just have to breathe through it. I'm kind of like Charlie Brown. Don't you love Charlie Brown and Peanuts? Sometimes I lie awake at night, he would say, and I ask, where have I gone wrong? And the voice says to me, this is going to take more than one night. And when that happens, we often try to fix the outer. Okay, so I got to fix this. It's a mess. But the Course in Miracles always reminded us, don't get discouraged and do not ask to change the world. Ooh. There's no point in trying to change the world. It's incapable of change because it is merely an effect of the law of cause and effect. Every effect has a cause. And where's the cause? In mind. The collective consciousness is creating it. But there is indeed a point in changing your thoughts about the world. Here you are changing the cause. The effect will change automatically. One of the things that Jesus said that I didn't like for a long time, he said, the poor you will have with you always. And that seemed to me very cold and uncaring. But what he was really saying is, as long as we're all living in this duality, where there's good, there's evil, where there's rich, there's poor, where there's you, there's me, and it's them against me, and as long as we live in that constant state of fighting and arguing, of opposites, we will always have the poor and the suffering and all those negative things until consciousness changes and the whole world wakes up to the fact that we're one and I am you and you are me. Then how could we allow the other to happen? And I love George Carlin the best. Remember George Carlin? Was he not one of the best comics ever? He said, I put $1 in a change machine and nothing changed. Remember that this week. I put $1 in that change machine and nothing changed. But I think it's so hard because we want to live with the familiar. We want to stay in our comfort level. I like things that I'm used to, that I'm comfortable with. Like pillows. My pillows get so old. I'm kind of like a baby with my blankie. I can't go anywhere without my pillow. And I've had it with me forever. It's got just the right shape under my head. And I don't want to buy a new one because I like my old one. It's comfortable. And shoes. I wear Crocs, not because they look good. God knows they don't look good. But they're so comfortable. And the last pair I had, I won't even tell you how many years I had that pair. But they were so comfortable. My consciousness is like my old shoes. Familiar, uncomfortable. But sometimes I get stuck there in that limitation of that consciousness. And I become like the Israelites who wandered through the desert wilderness. 40 years they wandered, and you've heard the old joke too many times to say it again, because what? Moses didn't ask for directions, right? You know that one. The Israelites were stuck in that old consciousness, and they whined and complained and argued and stumbled. And metaphysically, each one of them, they're all aspects of our own consciousness. We too whine and complain, waiting for the world to change, and wonder why nothing happens. We put $1 in the coin machine, in the change machine, and nothing happens. But they had a happy ending. They finally crossed over to the promised land. And I think it was because after 40 years, something in them finally changed. But they had to take the promised land. They had to shift into that higher consciousness. And that's why it took them so long. And our lives, too, are like wandering around in the desert of consciousness until we take the promised land. We have to take it by changing. And we, too, have to ask for directions from Spirit. Show me the way. Your guidance is guiding me right now. And then we have to watch for signs and hear those inner promptings. And most of all, trust the flow of life. Wherever we're going, wherever we are, God is. And every place we are in every moment is right where we're supposed to be. And a lot of times we're just there to see the change that we need to do. Where? In ourselves. Oops, in ourselves. Adi Ashante in the book Falling into Grace reminded us, when we begin to surrender our demand that life change, that life alter itself to suit our ideas, then everything opens up. We begin to awaken from this dream of separateness and struggle and realize that the grace we were always seeking is actually right there at the center of our own existence. It's just being expressed out there, right here, showing us what we need to do to change. And the Israelites forgot. They forgot their union with God and thought they were separate, and they were afraid and whined and complained. But their needs were met every day. They didn't notice that. The manna from heaven, which is like a dew substance in the desert. Every day they had food, and they were guided. Clouds by day and a light by night. I don't know if that was a UFO ship or God, but it doesn't matter either way. They were guided. And any fear or doubts were of their own making. That's what needed to change. So we too have to trust our journey of life, no matter what the circumstances, no matter where we end up, how long it takes, or who we're with. As within, so without. Together, as within, so without. And there's a blessing in all of it, the good, the bad, and even the ugly, showing us what we as a collective consciousness need to change. And man, it's out there. It's just showing us what we need to change. Now, the greatest example of trusting the journey of life, and this is my favorite story, I just love it. There was a documentary, I think you can get it on Netflix, called Searching for Sugarman. How many people have seen Searching for Sugarman? Just a few of you. Okay, great story. The man, true story, his name is Rodriguez, and he was a very talented musician. He was so talented that the record companies wanted to record him. So he did. He thought, I finally made it. He went and recorded an album, but it flopped in the United States. It just wasn't selling very much. He was a very humble man, and he thought, well, okay, this just isn't meant for me. So he quit music, or the music business. He went back to, I don't remember if it was Milwaukee or Detroit. Do you remember, Michael?
Detroit.
Was it Detroit? And he got a job in construction. Plus, he wanted to make a difference in the world. That was his biggest passion. So he ran for mayor and political office now and then. But most of all, he was a very humble man and worked in construction. Meanwhile, divine presence was at work in his life. This is why we always have to trust. Somebody, one of the few people that bought his album, ended up putting it in their suitcase and taking it over to Africa. And people there heard it, and they started copying it. They made bootleg copies of it. And pretty soon it was all over Africa, and it was a catalyst. It was an inspiration for protesting apartheid in southern Africa. Very dangerous there to protest. If you protested, you ended up in prison. But through music, it was safe. And so he was like the Pete Seeger of Africa. You wrote We Shall Overcome. Actually, he was more famous than Elvis or the Beatles in South Africa. Do you believe that? And other musicians were so inspired by him that they took up his type of music, and they started to sing it too. And the DVD said it gave people permission to free their minds. Where were they really in prison? In their minds. It gave people permission to free their minds. That's what changed. Well, Rodriguez was back in Detroit, never knew his popularity, didn't have a clue how popular he was over in Africa. And meanwhile, you know how people make up stories about people. So they make it, what happened to Rodriguez? And everybody had a story. But the one that really got around was that he committed suicide by setting himself on fire at a rock concert. That was the story that went around. And everybody felt really bad because they really loved this man. Well, years later, a DJ and a record shop owner decided he really wanted to know what happened to Rodriguez. So he went and searched for him, found out he was still alive, and made this documentary called Searching for Sugarman. Can you imagine how you'd feel if you found out Elvis was still alive? That must have been what it was like. And they were so excited they invited him to come to Africa. Now remember, Rodriguez himself didn't have a clue how popular he was there. He goes over and he was blown away. A full house, one concert after another. I think he did like 6 concerts because one just wasn't enough. They kept filling up. And every time he walked out, there were roars of cheers when he walked in. Can you imagine how that must have felt? Living so much of his life thinking his music never mattered. I love that story because the moral of that story is when we're wandering around in the wilderness of life, we have to know our union with God. Stop whining and complaining. Well, I give it a 5-minute whine. I always have a 5-minute whine. Ask for directions, follow the promptings and the signs, and trust the flow. There's purpose in everything. There's meaning in everything. You might be someone else's sugar man without even knowing it. And all the years he lived as such a humble man, when you watch the DVD, you just feel his presence, his energy. It's transcendent. All those years, he didn't know his music had changed a continent. And the producers that had produced the album were very dishonest. They never gave him any money. But he was never bitter about it. He never received money. And even money from his concerts, he gave to his children. That's how generous he was. By the end of the documentary, again, you can just feel that transcendent spirit. He crossed over to a parallel universe, the promised land of grace. And in Searching for Sugarman, the DVD, it tells you that home is acceptance, and acceptance is what he found in South Africa. Now, how do we achieve this? Well, we achieve it through forgiveness. The world of appearances seems unfair, it seems pretty crazy, but we have to change our perception and see it differently. Extending loving service to others. Rodriguez lived a life of serving others, helping others. He ran for mayor, tried to do good in the world, not knowing his real service was over in Africa. We have to trust that flow of life and not ask for the world to change. Oh, I want the world to change some days. I keep putting dollars in that change machine, and I wake up and it's still the same. And there I am with my old pillow, my old pair of shoes, and my old consciousness. Oops. Let's all say that together. Oops. What has to change? Our consciousness. Let's take that into prayer. Oh God, we do not ask to change the world. We ask to change ourselves. And we are willing to release and let go of the effort and the struggle. We are willing to stop waiting for the world to change, and we are open to receiving divine love flowing in and through us, assisting us in that grace-filled change, effortless and with ease as we release and let go. Divine love lifts us to that promised land in consciousness, where everyone is awakened to the oneness that we share, the divinity that we are in truth. And we are lifted up into the kingdom of heaven. We say thank you, Father, Mother God, in the nature of the Christ, and so it is. Amen. Amen.